40 years. Saralith had given the Alpha King 40 years of her life. She had borne his children, warmed his bed, stood beside his throne through wars and plagues and famines. She had loved him with a ferocity that had shaped her very bones. And in return, he had given her something she never expected: banishment. On the morning of their 40th anniversary, King Valdrin of Vailoria had summoned her to the throne room. She had expected flowers, perhaps a private celebration. Instead, she found him seated beside a woman half her age, a beautiful Omega with golden hair and hungry eyes. "You are released from your duties as queen," he had said, his voice colder than she had ever heard it. "You will leave by nightfall." No explanation, no gratitude, no goodbye. So Saralith had packed her belongings with trembling hands, her wolf howling inside her chest with a grief that threatened to tear her apart. 40 years of devotion, erased in a single morning. But as she reached for the last of her things, her fingers brushed something hidden beneath the floorboard of their shared chambers. A loose panel she had never noticed in 4 decades. Inside lay a small iron box, sealed with a lock that bore their initials intertwined. Their initials, hidden by him. The secret inside would destroy everything she thought she knew. It would reveal that her banishment was not a betrayal at all. It was a sacrifice. And the man she thought had stopped loving her had been dying for her all along. The throne room had never felt so cold. Saralith stood before the dais where she had once been crowned, her hands clasped in front of her, her spine straight despite the tremor in her legs. 40 years of standing in this room, 40 years of knowing every crack in the stone, every thread in the tapestries, every echo that bounced between the vaulted ceilings. And now she stood here, as a stranger. King Valdrin sat upon his throne, his silver hair catching the morning light. He had aged beautifully, the way Alpha Kings often did, his features sharpening into something regal and unyielding. But there was something different about him today. His jaw was set too tight. His eyes would not meet hers. Beside him sat a woman Saralith had never seen before. She was young, perhaps 25, with golden hair that cascaded over bare shoulders and eyes the color of spring leaves. An Omega. Saralith could smell her fertility from across the room, sweet and intoxicating. The kind of scent that made alphas lose their reason. Saralith. Valdrin's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You have served the crown faithfully. For that, you have my gratitude." Gratitude. The word landed like a slap. "But the kingdom requires an heir of pure blood. Lady Malis carries my child. She will be crowned queen by the next full moon." The world tilted. Saralith felt her wolf rear up inside her, snarling with a rage that burned through her veins. 40 years. She had given him 3 children. She had held his hand through the death of 2 of them. She had rebuilt his kingdom from ashes after the Southern Wars. And now this. "You are releasing me?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "After everything?" Valdrin's expression did not change. "You will be provided for. Estates in the northern mountains. Servants. Gold. Everything you need. Everything except my mate." For just a moment something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, perhaps. Or guilt. But it vanished so quickly Saralith wondered if she had imagined it. "The bond will be severed at sundown," he said quietly. "It will be painless." Painless. As if 40 years of love could be erased without agony. As if her heart was not already cracking into pieces right there on the throne room floor. "You promised me forever," Saralith whispered. Valdrin looked away. Forever was never mine to give. The dismissal was clear. Guards stepped forward to escort her out. Saralith turned on her heel and walked, refusing to let them see her break. She made it back to her chambers before the tears came. Her rooms, their rooms, still smelled like him. Cedar and winter frost, the scent that had wrapped around her for 4 decades. Saralith pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the mate bond pulse weakly beneath her ribs. He was really doing this. He was really letting her go. She moved mechanically, pulling clothes from wardrobes, folding them into trunks. The servants had offered to help, but she had sent them away. She needed to be alone. She needed to scream without witnesses. Her fingers brushed along the familiar surfaces. The vanity where he used to watch her brush her hair. The window seat where they had spent countless nights talking until dawn. The bed where they had made love, fought, reconciled, and made love again. All of it, gone. She knelt beside the bed to retrieve a fallen earring, and her knee pressed against something uneven in the floor. Sarilith paused. In 40 years, she had memorized every inch of these chambers. There had never been a loose board here. She pressed again. The wood shifted. Heart pounding, Sarilith ran her fingers along the edge until she found a gap. She pried it up, her breath catching as she revealed a hollow space beneath. Inside lay a small iron box, no bigger than her palm. It was old, the metal tarnished and worn, but the lock on its front gleamed as if recently polished. And engraved on that lock, unmistakably, were two letters intertwined. S and V, Sarilith and Valdrin. Their initials, bound together in iron just as their lives had been bound together in marriage. Sarilith lifted the box with unsteady hands. It was heavier than it looked. Something rattled inside. Why would Valdrin hide something with their initials? How long had this been here? She tried the lock, but it held firm. There was no key in the hollow, nothing else hidden beneath the floorboard. Just this box. Waiting for her. A knock at the door made her jump. "Your Majesty?" Orwyn's voice. Her elderly handmaid. "The carriages are ready." Sarilith slipped the box into the folds of her cloak. "I will be down shortly." She took one last look at the room where she had spent her entire adult life. Then she walked out without looking back. The northern estate was beautiful in the way that exile was beautiful. Snow-capped mountains surrounded the manor on three sides, their peaks lost in perpetual mist. The grounds were immaculate, the servants polite, the accommodations luxurious. But every comfort felt like a reminder of what she had lost. This was not home. This was a gilded cage. Sarilith had been here for 3 days before she finally allowed herself to examine the box. She sat by the fire in her new chambers, the iron weight cold against her palms. Their intertwined initials stared back at her, worn smooth by time. Someone had touched this lock many times. Someone had held this box and traced those letters over and over. Valdrin. It had to be. But why hide it beneath their floor? Why seal it with a lock she could not open? She had searched the hollow space again before leaving, found nothing. No key, no note, no explanation. Just this strange inheritance from a man who had thrown her away. Sarilith turned the box over, examining every surface. The iron was old, perhaps centuries old, but the craftsmanship was exquisite. Symbols were etched into the base, worn almost smooth by age. She traced them with her fingertip and felt a faint pulse of something beneath the metal. Magic. Her wolf stirred uneasily. Magic had been forbidden in Vyloria for generations, ever since the War of Witches nearly destroyed the kingdom. Yet here, hidden in her husband's chambers, was an object thrumming with old power. What had Valdrin been hiding? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Orwyn entered, carrying a tray of tea. The old woman had insisted on accompanying Sarilith into exile, refusing to let her former queen face banishment alone. "You have barely eaten in 3 days," Orwyn said gently, setting the tray down. Her eyes fell on the box. "What is that?" "Something I found hidden in my chambers," Sarilith admitted. "Before I left?" Orwyn stepped closer, her wrinkled face creasing with curiosity. When she saw the initials on the lock, she went very still. "Where did you find this?" Her voice had changed, sharper, almost afraid. "Beneath a floorboard, near the bed." Sarilith watched her carefully. "Orwyn, do you know what this is?" The old woman's hands shook as she reached out, not quite touching the box. "I have not seen this in 40 years, she whispered. "Not since your wedding night." Serelith's heart stopped. My wedding night? The king. He asked me to hide it. Said it was not time. Said you must never find it until… Orwen trailed off, her face paling. Until what? Until he could no longer protect you himself. The words hung in the air like smoke. Serelith felt the world tilt beneath her, everything she thought she understood shifting into new and terrifying shapes. Protect me from what? She demanded. Orwen, what is inside this box? The old woman shook her head, backing toward the door. I do not know. Truly I do not. He never told me, only made me swear to tell no one of its existence. Her eyes were bright with tears. I thought he had destroyed it. I thought it was over. What was over? But Orwen was already gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Serelith stared down at the box in her hands, her mind racing. Valdrin had hidden this on their wedding night. 40 years ago. He had kept it secret, kept it close, and touched it so often that he wore smooth the lock bearing their names. And Orwen believed it was meant to protect her. Protect her from what? She stood abruptly, crossing to the window. The night was clear. Stars scattered across the black sky like scattered diamonds. Somewhere far to the south, in the palace she had called home, her mate bond still pulsed weakly. The severing ritual had not worked. She had felt it at sundown 3 days ago, the moment the court witches attempted to break the bond. There had been pressure, pain, a sensation like hooks being torn from her chest. But then, nothing. The bond remained. Faint, stretched thin across the miles, but unbroken. Valdrin had to know. If she could feel it, so could he. Yet he had sent no word, no explanation, no demand that she return for a second attempt. Almost as if he had never intended to break it at all. Serelith looked down at the box again. The symbols on the base seemed to shimmer in the firelight, and she felt that pulse of magic again, stronger now. The box wanted to be opened. It was waiting for her. She needed to find the key, and she was beginning to suspect that the key was not an object at all. It was a truth. A secret. Something Valdrin had buried so deep that only the end of their marriage could unearth it. Outside her window, in the shadows between the trees, something moved. Serelith froze. Her wolf surged forward, senses sharpening. There, at the edge of the forest, a figure stood watching her. Not a servant, not a guard. A woman in a black cloak, her face hidden beneath a hood. Their eyes met across the darkness. And then the figure turned and vanished into the trees. 40 years earlier, Serelith had been nobody. She closed her eyes now, letting the memory rise like water from a deep well. The fire crackled in her chambers, but she was no longer here. She was 20 years old again, standing in a muddy village square, her clothes patched and worn, her stomach hollow with hunger. The war had taken everything: her parents, her home, her pack. She had survived by foraging, by hiding, by becoming so small and quiet that the soldiers marching through forgot she existed. And then the king's convoy had stopped in her village. She remembered the thunder of hooves, the flash of silver armor. Soldiers had poured into the square, demanding food and lodging. The villagers had scattered like mice, but Serelith had been too slow, too weak from hunger to run. A horse had nearly trampled her. She had fallen in the mud, looking up at the beast's hooves descending toward her skull. And then a voice had cut through the chaos. Stop. The horse had frozen mid-strike. Serelith had looked up into the face of the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Silver blonde hair, eyes sharp as winter, a jaw carved from marble. He had dismounted in a single fluid motion and knelt beside her in the mud as if she were something precious. Are you hurt? He had asked. No one had asked her that in months. No one had looked at her as if she mattered. She had burst into tears right there, sobbing into the mud while the Alpha King of Valoria held her shoulders and waited for her to finish. He had taken her back to the palace that night. Not as a servant or a spoil of war, but as a guest. He had given her food, clothes, a room with a real bed, and every day for 6 months he had visited her. They had talked about everything: books and stars and philosophy, the war and what it had cost, the loneliness of power, the ache of being surrounded by people who wanted something from you. Everyone wants me to be their king, Valdrin had told her once, late at night in the library, but no one wants me to be a man. I do, Cyrillith had said without thinking. Then she had blushed furiously. Valdrin had looked at her with something unreadable in his eyes. I believe you, he had said quietly. That is what terrifies me. She had not understood then. She understood now. He had been afraid. From the very beginning, he had been afraid. The courtship had been swift by royal standards. 6 months after their first meeting, Valdrin had asked her to be his queen. She had said yes before he finished the question, and he had laughed, really laughed, for the first time since she had known him. Their wedding had been magnificent. Thousands of guests, rivers of wine, flowers cascading from every surface. Cyrillith had walked down the aisle in a gown that weighed more than she did, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might escape her chest. And Valdrin had waited at the altar with tears in his eyes. I never thought I would have this, he had whispered as she reached him. I never thought I would have you. You have me, she had promised, forever. He had kissed her then, and the crowd had erupted in cheers, and Cyrillith had believed, truly believed, that nothing could ever tear them apart. Their wedding night had been gentle. Valdrin had been patient, tender, and worshipful. He had touched her like she was sacred, had whispered her name like a prayer. And afterward, as she lay in his arms, drunk on love and hope, she had noticed something strange. He had left the bed while she slept. She had woken briefly, seen him kneeling by the window, his hands pressed against the floor. He had been hiding something. She had been too drowsy to wonder what. The next morning she had forgotten entirely. 40 years. 40 years. And she had never remembered that moment until now. Cyrillith opened her eyes, her heart pounding. The fire had burned low, casting shadows across the walls. The iron box sat on the table before her, waiting. He had hidden it on their wedding night, right after they had consummated their bond, right after she had become his mate. What had he been so desperate to conceal? She thought back through the decades, searching for other moments that had not quite fit. There had been times, she realized now, when Valdrin had seemed distant. Times when he had stared at her with an expression she could not name. Times when he had held her so tightly it felt like he was saying goodbye. She had attributed it to the burdens of ruling, the weight of the crown, the loneliness he had confessed to her in that library so long ago. But what if it had been something else? What if, every day for 40 years, Valdrin had been carrying a secret that was slowly killing him? She thought of his face in the throne room, the way his eyes had refused to meet hers, the flicker of pain she had dismissed as guilt. What if it had not been guilt at all? What if it had been grief? Cyrillith picked up the box, pressing it against her chest. The metal was warm now, almost alive. The magic inside pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. What were you protecting me from? She whispered into the darkness. No answer came, but somewhere, far to the south, she felt the mate bond shudder. And for just a moment, she could have sworn she heard Valdrin scream. The scream echoed through the mate bond like a blade through flesh. Cyrillith gasped, doubling over as pain that was not her own ripped through her chest. It lasted only a moment, a flash of agony so intense it stole her breath, and then it was gone. But the echo remained, reverberating through her ribs like the toll of a funeral bell. Valdrin was in pain, real, terrible pain. She was on her feet before she realized she had moved. The iron box clutched against her chest. Whatever was happening to him, whatever had caused that scream, it was connected to this. She knew it with a certainty that transcended logic. The mate bond pulsed weakly, stretched thin across hundreds of miles, but it was still there, still alive. And through it, she could feel something she had not felt in years. Fear. Valdrin was afraid. The Alpha King of Vyloria, who had faced armies without flinching, who had rebuilt a kingdom from ashes, who had never once shown weakness in 40 years of rule, was terrified. Serelith moved to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. The figure in the black cloak was gone, vanished into the forest hours ago. But she had not imagined it. Someone had been watching her, someone who knew she was here. A soft knock at the door made her spin around. "Enter," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The door opened, but it was not Orwyn who stepped through. It was the woman from the forest. She was older than Serelith had expected, perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair pulled back from a face carved by time and hardship. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and they held a weight that spoke of secrets carried too long. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty." Her voice was low, melodic. "But we do not have much time." Serelith's wolf surged forward, hackles raised. "Who are you? How did you get past the guards?" "The guards see what they expect to see. An old woman walking through shadows draws little attention." She stepped closer, her gaze falling on the iron box in Serelith's hands. "You found it. Good. I was not certain you would." "You know what this is?" "I know what it contains. And I know why he hid it." The woman's expression softened with something that looked almost like grief. "My name is Thessaly. I was the king's nursemaid when he was a boy, and I have waited 40 years for this moment." Serelith stared at her, her mind racing. Valdrin never mentioned a nursemaid. He would not. He was forbidden to speak of me, forbidden to acknowledge my existence. Thessaly moved to the fire, her aged hands extended toward the warmth. "Just as he was forbidden to love you." The words landed like stones in still water. "Forbidden? The curse does not permit it. Love, true love, is death for the kings of Valoria." Thessaly turned to face her, firelight dancing across her weathered features. "Every king who has ever fallen in love has died within the year. Valdrin's father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, all of them." Serelith shook her head, refusing to accept it. "That cannot be true. Valdrin has loved me for 40 years. He is still alive." "Is he?" Thessaly's voice was gentle, but the question cut deep. "When did you last see him truly well? When did his skin last hold warmth? When did his eyes last hold light?" The questions pierced through Serelith's denial. She thought of the last decade, the gradual changes she had attributed to age. Valdrin growing thinner. Valdrin sleeping less. Valdrin's hands always cold even in summer. Valdrin's eyes, once bright as winter stars, slowly dimming to ash. "He has been dying," Serelith whispered. "All this time. Slowly. So slowly you would not notice until it was too late." Thessaly nodded gravely. "The curse feeds on love. The deeper the love, the faster it consumes. Valdrin has fought it for 4 decades by suppressing his feelings, by forcing distance between his heart and his actions, but he could not sustain it forever." "Then why send me away now? Why take another queen?" "Because the curse has accelerated. Something changed. Something made it impossible for him to keep fighting." Thessaly stepped closer, her dark eyes boring into Serelith's. "He sent you away, because if you had stayed, you would have watched him die, and the curse would have taken you with him." Serelith's blood ran cold. "Taken me?" "The mate bond connects you. When he dies, the curse will travel through that bond and claim you as well. He sent you away to sever the connection, to save your life. But the bond did not sever. No." Thessaly's lips curved into something almost like a smile. "It did not. Which means there is still time. But not much." Serelith looked down at the iron box, her hands unsteady. "What is inside this?" "The key to breaking the curse. Valdrin found it decades ago, but he could not use it himself. The magic requires something he does not possess." Thessaly reached out, her fingers hovering over the box without touching it. "It requires the willing sacrifice of the one who loves him most." The fire crackled. The wind howled outside the windows. And Serelith felt something shift inside her chest, a resolve hardening into iron. "Then I will make that sacrifice," she said. "Tell me how to open it." Thessaly shook her head slowly. "It is not that simple. The box will only open when you understand the full truth. When you know what Valdrin has done for you and why. When you comprehend the depth of his sacrifice." "Then tell me." "I cannot. The truth must be discovered, not given. That is how the magic works." Thessaly moved toward the door. "But I can take you to someone who can help. Someone who has been waiting almost as long as I have." "Who?" Thessaly paused at the threshold, her expression shadowed with old pain. "The woman who cast the curse in the first place. Valdrin's mother." The journey took 3 days. They traveled by night, avoiding main roads, staying in abandoned cottages and ruined waypoints. Thessaly moved with surprising speed for her age, and Sarilith followed in grim silence, the iron box never leaving her hands. Every night she felt the mate bond weaken. Every night she felt Valdrin slipping further away. He was dying. She could feel it now that she knew what to look for. The bond that had once burned bright between them was flickering like a candle in a storm. Sometimes she caught flashes of his emotions, grief and regret, and a desperate, consuming love that made her want to weep. He still loved her. Even now, even dying, he loved her. On the third night, they arrived at a tower carved into the side of a mountain. It rose from the stone like a finger pointing at the heavens, ancient and weathered, its windows dark. Magic hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Sarilith's wolf whimpered at the boundary, unwilling to cross. "She has been imprisoned here for 40 years, Thessaly said quietly. Valdrin's father locked her away when he discovered what she had done. He could not kill her without accelerating the curse, so he condemned her to this instead." "What did she do?" Thessaly did not answer. She simply walked toward the tower's entrance. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Dust covered every surface, and the stairs spiraling upward seemed to stretch into infinity. They climbed in silence, Sarilith's legs burning, her heart pounding. At the top, they found a single door. Thessaly knocked once, twice, 3 times. The door swung open on its own. The chamber beyond was circular, its walls lined with books and bottles and strange artifacts. A fire burned in a hearth despite the decay, casting warm light across faded carpets and crumbling furniture. And in a chair by the fire sat a woman who had once been beautiful. She was ancient now, her skin papery and thin, her white hair hanging limp around a face that bore the echoes of Valdrin's features. The same cheekbones, the same shape of the eyes. But where Valdrin's gaze had been cold with control, hers burned with something wild and broken. "So," she said, her voice like dry leaves, "you finally came." Sarilith stepped forward, her grip tightening on the iron box. "You are Valdrin's mother, Queen Isaveth." "Former queen, former mother, former everything." Isaveth laughed, a brittle sound. "I have been nothing for 40 years. Less than nothing. A ghost locked in stone. You cast the curse on your own bloodline. Why?" Isaveth's smile faded. She stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking. "Because I was desperate. Because I was foolish. Because I loved my husband so much that when he fell in love with another woman, I would have burned the world to keep him." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Sarilith felt her stomach turn. The curse was meant for her. For his mistress. Isaveth's hands clenched in her lap. "I sought out a witch, paid her with blood and gold, and begged her to make him stop loving anyone but me. But magic is not precise. Magic is not kind. The witch warned me that curses meant to control love always twist into something monstrous. And you did it anyway. I did it anyway." Isaveth met her eyes, and there was no defiance there, only exhaustion. The curse bound to his bloodline instead of just to him. Any king of our blood who falls truly in love will die. Slowly, painfully, consumed from the inside by the very emotion that should have saved them. Sarilith thought of Valdrin's cold hands, his dimming eyes, his careful distance that had always felt like restraint. "He has been fighting it for 40 years, she breathed. "Every day. Every moment. He is stronger than his father was, stronger than any of them. A tear slipped down Isaveth's papery cheek. His father lasted 3 years after falling in love. His grandfather lasted 2. But Valdrin, he found a way to love you without surrendering to it completely. He held himself back, kept part of his heart locked away. It was the only reason he survived. What changed? Why is he dying now? Isaveth's gaze dropped to the iron box in Serelith's hands. Because he finally stopped fighting. Something happened that made him believe he had no choice. He accepted his death. And in doing so, he accelerated the curse beyond recovery. What happened? I do not know. Communication with the outside world has been forbidden to me. Isaveth rose from her chair with visible effort, her bones creaking. But I know what is in that box. And I know what you must do to save him. She crossed to a shelf and retrieved a small vial filled with liquid that shimmered like starlight. The curse requires sacrifice, a life for a life. Love for love. She pressed the vial into Serelith's free hand. Inside that box is a ritual, a way to transfer the curse from one person to another. Valdrin found it decades ago and has been preparing for this moment ever since. Serelith stared at the vial. Transfer it? To whom? Isaveth's smile was sad, knowing, resigned. To the one who cast it, of course. To me. Understanding crashed over Serelith like a wave. He wants you to take back the curse, to die in his place. It is justice. It is mercy. It is the only way. Isaveth touched Serelith's face with shaking fingers. But the ritual requires something that cannot be forced. It requires me to willingly accept my death. And it requires you to be the one who delivers it. Me? You are his mate, his love, his salvation. Isaveth's voice broke. And you are the only one who can make the choice that will set him free. But first, you must understand why he sent you away. You must know the full truth. Then tell me. Isaveth shook her head. I cannot. My son made me swear on blood and magic that I would not speak of it until the box was opened. But I can tell you this. She leaned closer, her breath cold against Serelith's ear. The woman who sits on his throne now is not what she appears. She is not his lover. She is not carrying his child. She is a vessel, prepared by dark magic, meant to receive the curse if you refuse to return. Serelith's blood turned to ice. What? Valdrin has been fighting 2 battles. One against the curse, and one against the man who has been manipulating everything from the shadows, his trusted advisor, Corvain. The name struck like a blow. Serelith remembered Corvain, his smooth voice, his ever-present smile. He had been at Valdrin's side for decades. He had attended their wedding. He had helped raise their children. Corvain is behind this? Corvain wants the throne. He always has. And he discovered that if Valdrin dies by the curse, with no mate bond intact, the crown will pass to the next eligible bloodline. Isaveth gripped her arm with surprising strength. His bloodline. Corvain is a distant cousin, hidden for generations. He has been waiting for his chance. Serelith felt the world tilt. Everything she had believed was wrong. Valdrin's coldness, his distance, his banishment of her. All of it had been a desperate attempt to protect her from a web of lies so intricate it had taken 40 years to weave. I have to go back, she said. I have to stop him. Yes. Isaveth released her, stepping back. But you cannot do it alone. Corvain has allies in the court, guards loyal to him, magic at his disposal. You will need help. What kind of help? The door behind them creaked open. A young man stepped through, silver-haired and gray-eyed, his features achingly familiar. Serelith's heart stopped. He looked exactly like Valdrin had looked 40 years ago. Mother, he said quietly. I came as soon as I received your message. Serelith stared at him, unable to breathe. That is impossible. My sons are dead. Both of them died in the plague 20 years ago. The young man met her gaze, and there was grief in his eyes, and guilt, and desperate hope. The plague was a lie. he said. Corvain took us. He has been holding us prisoner ever since, waiting for the right moment. Serelith's knees buckled. Thessaly caught her before she fell. Your sons are alive, Your Majesty, Thessaly said softly. Both of them. And they are ready to help you reclaim everything that was stolen. She could not stop staring at him. Caden, her firstborn son, the child she had held moments after his first breath, the boy she had watched take his first steps, the young man she had mourned for 20 years. He was standing before her now, alive, whole, and older than he should have been, but unmistakably hers. She could see Valdrin in the sharpness of his jaw, herself in the softness of his eyes. He smelled like pack, like family, like home. Mother. His voice cracked on the word. I know this is impossible to understand. I know you have questions, but we do not have time. Do not have time? Serelith's voice rose, hysteria edging into it. I buried you, Caden. I buried both of you. I stood over empty coffins and wept until I could not breathe. I nearly died from the grief. The coffins were empty because we were not dead. Caden stepped closer, his hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. Corvain poisoned us with something that mimicked death. We woke in a cell beneath his estate, confused and terrified. We have been there ever since. How did you escape? Thessaly. He glanced at the old woman with gratitude. She has been working against Corvain for years, building a network of allies, waiting for the right moment. When Father sent you away, she knew it was time. Serelith turned to Thessaly, her mind reeling. You knew my sons were alive. For 20 years you knew, and you said nothing. Saying something would have endangered them further. Corvain made it clear that if anyone suspected the truth, he would kill them for real. Thessaly's voice was heavy with old sorrow. The king knew. He has always known. It was another secret eating him alive. Valdrin knew. He had known their sons were alive, had carried that knowledge in silence, had watched her grieve while unable to speak the truth. The weight of his suffering struck Serelith with physical force. 40 years of loving her while fighting a death curse. 20 years of knowing his children lived while watching her mourn them. Every cold distance, every careful restraint, every moment that had felt like rejection had been him drowning alone to keep her afloat. I have to see him, she said. Now. Tonight. You will. Caden took her hands in his and the touch sent a shock through her, confirmation that this was real. But first, we need a plan. Corvain controls the palace guard. He has poisoned the court against you, spread rumors that you were exiled for treason. If you walk through the front gates, you will be arrested or killed. Then how do we get in? There are passages. Isabeth spoke from her chair by the fire, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. Secret ways built into the palace centuries ago. I can show you the entrance nearest the king's chambers. Caden nodded. We can get you to Father. But once you are there, you will need to open the box. The ritual inside is the only thing that can save him now. Serelith looked down at the iron box, still clutched against her chest. The symbols on its base seemed to glow faintly in the firelight, responding to her proximity, to her emotions. It will not open, she said. I have tried. It will open when you understand why Father sent you away, when you comprehend his sacrifice completely. Caden's jaw tightened. There is one more thing you do not know. Something Father made us swear to keep secret until the end. More secrets? Bitterness crept into her voice. How many more secrets can there be? Just one, but it is the most important one. Caden released her hands and stepped back. He exchanged a glance with Thessaly, with Isabeth. Some silent agreement passed between them. The new queen, Melis. He spoke the name like poison. She is not some ambitious Omega seeking to steal the throne. She is a construct, a body created by Corvain's witch to house the curse. I know. Your grandmother told me. But do you know why Father agreed to it? Why he allowed her into the palace at all? Serelith shook her head, dread pooling in her stomach. Because Corvain threatened to kill you if he did not. Caden's voice hardened. He gave father a choice. Either accept Malus as queen and let the curse transfer to her when he died, or watch you be murdered in your sleep. Father chose to send you away instead, hoping to sever the bond and remove you from Corvain's reach. The revelation slammed into her with devastating force. Every assumption she had made collapsed. Valdrin had not chosen a younger woman. He had not tired of her. He had not fallen out of love. He had been given an impossible choice, and he had chosen to lose everything rather than lose her. He surrendered his throne to protect me, she whispered. He surrendered everything. His dignity, his legacy, his life. Caden's eyes glistened. And now he is lying in his chambers, barely alive, while Corvain waits for him to take his last breath. Rage ignited in Sarilith's chest, white-hot and cleansing. She had spent 3 days grieving a betrayal that had never happened. She had spent 40 years misunderstanding a man who had loved her with every fiber of his being. No more. I am going to kill Corvain, she said quietly. Good. Caden's smile was wolfish, predatory. So are we. The plan came together quickly. Sarilith, Thessaly, and Caden would enter through the secret passages while the second son, Lorien, created a distraction at the gates. They would reach Valdrin's chambers, perform the ritual, and confront Corvain before he could interfere. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It was the only option they had. As they prepared to leave the tower, Isaveth caught Sarilith's arm one final time. When you open that box, you will face a choice. The hardest choice of your life. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. The ritual requires sacrifice. Someone must die for Valdrin to live. You said you would accept the curse, that you would take it back. And I will. Gladly. Isaveth's eyes were bright with tears. But the magic does not care about willingness alone. It cares about love. The person who performs the ritual must offer something precious, something that costs them dearly. What kind of something? Isaveth hesitated. The ritual will tell you. When the box opens, you will know. She released Sarilith's arm and turned away, dismissing further questions. They descended the tower in silence, emerging into a night thick with clouds and the promise of rain. Horses waited at the base, saddled and ready. Sarilith mounted hers, feeling the weight of the iron box against her hip. The mate bond flickered weakly, barely a whisper now. Hold on, she murmured into the darkness. I am coming. The bond pulsed once, faintly as if in response, and they rode toward the palace where everything would end or begin. The secret passages smelled of dust and forgotten time. Sarilith moved through the darkness, one hand trailing along the cold stone wall, the other clutching the iron box against her chest. Thessaly walked ahead with a small torch, its flame casting dancing shadows across walls that had not seen light in decades. Caden brought up the rear, silent and watchful. Every few minutes, Sarilith glanced back at him, still unable to fully believe he was real, her son, her firstborn, alive. The passage narrowed as they descended beneath the palace foundations. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, and the air grew thick with the weight of ancient stone pressing down from above. We are close, Thessaly whispered. The king's chambers are directly above us. Sarilith's heart pounded. The mate bond had grown so faint she could barely feel it now, just the barest thread connecting her to the man she had loved for 40 years. But it was still there. He was still alive. Barely. They climbed a spiraling staircase carved into the rock itself, emerging through a hidden panel in what had once been a storage room. Sarilith recognized it immediately. It was connected to Valdrin's private study, separated only by a thick tapestry. Thessaly pressed her ear to the fabric, listening. After a long moment, she nodded. Empty. But there are guards outside the main door. We must be silent. They slipped through the tapestry into the study. It looked exactly as Sarilith remembered. Books lining every wall, maps spread across the desk, the faint scent of cedar and ink. But there was something else now. A wrongness in the air. A coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. Death was close. She could smell it. The door to the bedchamber stood slightly ajar. Sarilith approached it with faltering steps, her wolf keening inside her chest. She pushed it open, and there he was. Valdrin lay in their bed, surrounded by white sheets that made his skin look gray. He had always been pale, but this was something else. This was the pallor of a man whose life was measured in hours, not days. His silver hair spread across the pillow like frost. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. His hands, those hands that had held her so many times, lay motionless at his sides, the fingers tinged with blue. Sarilith crossed to him in 3 strides, falling to her knees beside the bed. Valdrin. His name came out as a broken whisper. Valdrin, I am here. His eyes fluttered open. Once bright as winter stars, they were now clouded with pain and exhaustion. But when they focused on her face, something sparked in their depths. Sarilith. Her name on his lips was barely a breath. You should not be here. Corvain? I know about Corvain. I know everything. She took his cold hand in both of hers, pressing it against her cheek. I know about the curse, about our sons, about why you sent me away. Tears slipped down her cheeks, landing on his frozen fingers. I am so sorry, she breathed. I thought you had stopped loving me. I thought you had chosen someone else, but you were dying for me this whole time. Not dying. A ghost of a smile crossed his cracked lips. Living. Every moment with you was living, even when it was killing me. Why did you not tell me? Why did you carry this alone? Because you would have tried to save me, and the only way to save me would have destroyed you. His hand twitched in hers, trying to squeeze. The ritual. The box. Corvain does not know I found it. He thinks I am helpless. Your mother told me. She said the ritual can transfer the curse. To her. Yes. Valdrin's eyes drifted closed, his breathing growing more labored. She agreed. Decades ago. But I could not do it. I could not kill my own mother, even to save myself. She wants to die, Valdrin. She has been waiting for this. I know. But the ritual requires more than her death. His eyes opened again, and there was fear in them now. Real fear. It requires the one performing it to give up something precious. Something that matters more than life itself. Sarilith thought of Isabeth's warning. The hardest choice of your life. What kind of something? Valdrin's gaze moved to the iron box still pressed against her chest. Open it, he whispered, and you will understand. Sarilith looked down at the box. The symbols on its base were glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The lock bearing their intertwined initials seemed to warm beneath her fingers. She understood suddenly what she had been missing. The box did not require a key. It required understanding. It required her to know the full truth. And now she did. She knew about the curse, about Valdrin's sacrifice, about their sons, about Corvain's treachery. She knew that every cold distance had been a desperate attempt to survive. She knew that every moment of restraint had been a battle against his own death. She knew that he had loved her completely, perfectly, devastatingly. And she knew that she loved him the same way. The lock clicked open in her hands. Inside the box lay a single piece of parchment, yellow with age, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and move in the dim light. Beside it rested a small knife with a bone handle, its blade dark with old stains. Sarilith lifted the parchment with trembling fingers. The symbols rearranged themselves as she watched, forming words she could suddenly read. Blood of the cursed, blood of the caster, blood of the beloved. She read the words aloud, her voice shaking. 3 bloods to break what 3 bloods made. The curse was cast with blood magic, Valdrin explained weakly. My ancestors' blood, the witch's blood, and the blood of my ancestors' mistress, the woman my grandmother wanted to destroy. 3 people created it. 3 people must end it. Yes, the cursed king, the caster of the curse, and... He trailed off, his winter-pale gaze sliding away from hers. And the beloved. Sarilith finished. Me. Silence fell between them, heavy with implication. The ritual requires all three of us to bleed, she said slowly, to offer something precious. Not just bleed. Valdrin's voice was barely audible now. The beloved must offer up a piece of their soul, the part that holds the love, the part that makes them who they are. Horror crept through Sarilith's veins. You mean I would have to stop loving you? No. You would have to sacrifice your ability to love at all, ever again. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. That is why I never performed the ritual. That is why I chose to die instead. I could not ask you to give up your heart to save mine. The weight of his words pressed down on her like a mountain. He had been dying for 40 years rather than ask her to make this sacrifice. He had endured unimaginable suffering to protect something she had not even known was at stake. Her capacity for love, her heart, her soul. You foolish, beautiful, impossible man, she whispered. And she knew exactly what she was going to do. The door to the bedchamber slammed open. Corvain strode through, flanked by 4 guards in black armor. His handsome face twisted with fury as he took in the scene. Sarilith kneeling beside the king's bed, the iron box open in her hands, Caden and Thessaly standing ready near the hidden passage. So the exiled queen returns, he said, his voice dripping with false pleasantness. And she has brought friends. How touching. Sarilith rose slowly, placing herself between Corvain and Valdrin's prone form. Your treachery ends tonight, Corvain. My treachery? He laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. I have spent 40 years waiting for this moment. 40 years watching that fool on the throne waste away for love of a common Omega. Do you have any idea how pathetic it has been? You poisoned our sons. You imprisoned them for 20 years. I preserved them. Insurance, in case the curse took too long. His eyes flickered to Caden. Though I see my insurance has escaped. No matter. They cannot stop what is already in motion. He snapped his fingers. The guards moved forward, drawing their swords. Caden stepped in front of his mother, his own blade appearing in his hand. You will have to go through me first. Gladly. The fight erupted in a chaos of steel and snarling. Caden moved like water, his blade finding gaps in the guard's armor with precision born of desperation. Thessaly wielded a knife with surprising skill, her aged body moving with remembered grace. But there were too many guards, too many blades. Sarilith watched the battle with growing despair. They were losing. Corvain stood back, watching with a satisfied smile, waiting for his men to finish the job. The mate bond flickered weakly against her ribs. Valdrin was fading. She could feel him slipping away, his life force guttering like a candle in a storm. There was no more time. She looked down at the ritual in her hands. The knife. The parchment. The instructions burned into her mind. 3 bloods, 3 sacrifices. Isaveth had agreed to take back the curse. She would suffer the consequences so Valdrin could live. That was 1 blood. 1 sacrifice. Valdrin's blood was already given. She'd slowly over 40 years of fighting the curse. That was 2. The 3rd blood was hers. Her sacrifice, her choice, the ability to love, her heart, her soul. Sarilith thought of her children, grown and strong despite everything. She thought of her grandchildren, whom she had never met but knew existed. She thought of Valdrin, the man who had loved her so completely that he had chosen death rather than diminish her. If she made this sacrifice, she would save him, but she would never feel love again. Not for him, not for their sons, not for anyone. She would be hollow, empty, a shell walking through the rest of her days. Was that better than death? Was that better than watching him die? A guard's blade caught Caden across the arm. He stumbled, and 2 more guards closed in. Thessaly screamed as she was thrown against the wall. Corvain laughed. And Sarilith made her choice. She raised the bone-handled knife and drew it across her palm. Blood welled up, hot and red, dripping onto the parchment. The symbols flared with golden light. "What are you doing?" Corvain's smile vanished. "Stop her!" But Sarilith was already moving. She pressed her bleeding palm against Valdrin's chest, directly over his frozen heart. "Blood of the beloved," she intoned, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. "I offer what is asked." The mate bond blazed to life, brighter than it had been in years. She felt Valdrin's consciousness brush against hers, weak but present. "Sarilith, no." His voice echoed in her mind. "Please, do not do this." "I would rather lose my ability to love than lose you," she replied silently. "That is the truth I finally understand. You will be empty. You will be alone. I have been empty and alone for 3 days, believing you betrayed me. This is nothing compared to that." The ritual pulled at her, demanding its price. She felt something inside her beginning to shift, to loosen, to separate. Her love, her heart, her soul. She held on to it with everything she had, not fighting the ritual, but savoring it. Savoring the feeling of loving him one last time before it was torn away. "I love you," she said, both aloud and through the bond. "I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you for 40 more, even if I cannot feel it. Remember that. Remember this moment." "Sarilith!" The door burst open again. Lorien, her second son, charged through with a force of guards in silver armor, the loyal guards, the ones who had remained faithful to the true king. Steel clashed against steel as the tide of battle turned. Corvain's men found themselves outnumbered, outmatched, overwhelmed. But Sarilith barely noticed. The ritual was reaching its crescendo. The golden light engulfed her and Valdrin both, binding them in a cocoon of ancient magic. She felt Isaveth's presence join them, distant but powerful. The old queen had begun her part of the ritual from the tower, her blood offered willingly, her sacrifice already beginning. 3 bloods, 3 sacrifices, 3 threads weaving together to unravel a curse that had poisoned a kingdom for generations. The pain came suddenly, sharp and absolute. Sarilith screamed as something was ripped from her chest. Not her heart, not physically, but something deeper, something essential. The part of her that had swelled with joy at her children's first steps. The part that had ached with grief at their supposed deaths. The part that had burned with fury and hope and desperate, consuming love. It was being taken. She let it go. For him. For their sons. For the kingdom that had been twisted by this curse for too long. She let it all go. And then, silence. Sarilith opened her eyes to chaos. The bedchamber was in ruins, furniture overturned, tapestries torn, blood splattered across the ancient stone. Guards lay scattered across the floor, some dead, some groaning in pain. Corvain was on his knees, his wrists bound behind his back, Lorien's blade pressed against his throat. The advisor's face was pale with fury and fear, his schemes crumbling around him. But Sarilith could not bring herself to care. She felt empty. Not sad, not relieved, not triumphant. Just empty. The place where her love had lived was hollow now, a void where warmth used to be. "Mother?" Caden's voice reached her through a fog. "Mother, are you all right?" She turned to look at him. Her son. Her firstborn. The child she had wept over for 20 years. She remembered loving him. She remembered the feeling. But when she reached for it now, there was nothing. "The ritual worked," she said flatly. "The curse is broken." "And the woman? Malis?" Sarilith asked, her voice hollow. "Gone," Lorien said grimly. The moment the curse broke, she collapsed. There was nothing inside her. No soul, no life force. Just an empty vessel. He shook his head. Corvain's witch created her from dark magic. When the ritual cleansed the palace, she simply ceased to exist. Sarilith felt nothing at this news, but she understood its significance. The threat was truly over. Valdrin. The name came out without emotion. She turned to the bed where her husband lay. He was sitting up, Color had returned to his cheeks. His eyes were bright again, clear and sharp, the gray of winter skies rather than dying ash. The frost that had crept across his skin was gone, replaced by healthy warmth. He was alive. He was healed. And Sarilith felt nothing. Valdrin swung his legs over the edge of the bed, moving with strength that should have been impossible moments ago. His gaze found hers, and she saw the moment he understood what she had done. No. The word tore from him like a wound. Sarilith, no. Please tell me you did not. The ritual required a sacrifice. I made it. Her voice was calm, detached. You are alive. The curse is broken. Our sons are free. Corvain is defeated. Everything is as it should be. Valdrin crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face with desperate tenderness. She felt the warmth of his palms, registered the pressure of his touch, but the flutter of joy that should have accompanied it was absent. You gave up your heart for me, he breathed. It seemed a fair trade. No. Tears streamed down his face. No, it was not fair. It was never meant to be you. I would have died 1,000 times rather than let you make this choice. I know. That is why I made it before you could stop me. He pulled her against his chest, holding her with fierce desperation. She allowed it, standing passive in his embrace, remembering what it had felt like to be held by him, remembering the warmth, the safety, the overwhelming rightness. Now there was only memory, no feeling. I will find a way to fix this, Valdrin swore. I will search every archive, consult every witch, and travel to the ends of the earth. I will restore what you lost. Perhaps, Sarilith said. Perhaps not. Either way, you are alive. That is enough. But even as she said it, she knew she did not feel it. She did not feel anything. Corvain laughed from his knees, the sound bitter and broken. How delicious, he spat. You saved him, and it destroyed you. The curse takes its price one way or another. Valdrin released Sarilith and turned to face his former advisor with murder in those storm-colored eyes she had loved for decades. You poisoned my family. You imprisoned my sons. You tried to steal my throne. His voice was quiet, controlled, more terrifying than any shout. Do you have any final words? Only this. Corvain's smile was vicious. Even if you kill me, you cannot undo what has been done. Your queen is hollow now. She will never love you again. You won every battle and lost the only thing that mattered. Valdrin stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked back at Sarilith, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not despair, but determination. Resolve. You are wrong, he said quietly. Love is not so easily defeated. He turned to Lorien. Take him to the dungeons. He will face trial before the full court. Lorien nodded, dragging Corvain toward the door. The advisor screamed threats and curses as he was hauled away, his voice fading into the corridors of the palace. Silence fell. Valdrin stood in the center of the ruined bedchamber, his sons on either side of him, his queen before him. His family, reunited after 40 years of suffering. And yet, Sarilith watched them without feeling. Kaden reached for her hand, and she allowed the touch. Lorien spoke words of comfort, and she heard them without response. Empty. She was empty. Valdrin crossed to her again, slower this time. He took her hands in his thumbs stroking across her knuckles. Do you remember, he said softly, the first night we met? In that muddy village square? I remember. You were starving, terrified, alone, and I asked if you were hurt. You did. You started crying, right there in the mud, and I thought... He paused, his voice cracking. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Sarilith said nothing. She remembered the moment, but the warmth of it was gone. I fell in love with you that night, Valdrin continued. Before I even knew your name. Before I knew anything about you except that you were brave enough to cry in front of a stranger. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing them gently. I spent 40 years trying not to love you, and I failed every single day. I failed magnificently. The curse is broken now. You can love freely. Yes, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that my love is strong enough for both of us. His gaze met hers, fierce and unwavering. You may not feel it now. You may never feel it again. But I will love you anyway. I will love you enough to fill the emptiness. I will love you until the stars burn out and the mountains crumble to dust. Sarilith stared at him. She felt nothing. But somewhere, deep in the hollow where her heart used to be, something stirred. Not love. Not yet. But the faintest echo of it. The memory of what it had felt like to be cherished. I do not deserve you, she said quietly. You saved my life. You saved our sons. You ended a curse that poisoned my family for generations. Valdrin's smile was watery but real. If anyone does not deserve anyone, it is me who does not deserve you. He pulled her into his arms again, and this time, Sarilith let herself lean into the embrace. She could not feel the love, but she could feel him, his warmth, his strength, his unwavering presence. And for now, that would have to be enough. 6 months passed. The kingdom of Iloria healed slowly, like a patient recovering from a long illness. Corvain's trial had been swift and merciless, his execution witnessed by thousands who had suffered under his hidden tyranny. The guards loyal to him were imprisoned or exiled. The court was purged of his influence, and the people celebrated their queen's return. Sarilith stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching the sun set over the mountains. The same mountains where she had been exiled. The same mountains where she had discovered the truth. She still could not feel love. The hollow place in her chest remained, unchanging despite the months that had passed. Healers had examined her. Witches had consulted ancient texts. Nothing had restored what the ritual had taken. But something else had happened instead. Valdrin had kept his promise. Every single day, without fail, he had loved her. He had brought her flowers and read her poetry. He had held her hand through diplomatic meetings and danced with her at banquets. He had kissed her forehead each morning and held her close each night. And slowly, gradually, something had begun to grow in the emptiness. Not love, not exactly, but something adjacent to it, a warmth that had no name, a comfort that defied explanation, a sense of belonging that filled the void without quite healing it. She was learning to feel again. Not the same feelings as before, but new ones, different ones. Feelings that existed because she chose them, not because they erupted unbidden. The door opened behind her. Valdrin stepped onto the balcony, his silver hair catching the fading light. He was fully restored now, strong and vital, looking younger than he had in decades. The children are asking for you, he said softly. Dinner is ready. The children. Caden and Lorien, grown men now, but always her children. They had moved back into the palace with their families, filling the halls with noise and laughter that had been absent for far too long. Grandchildren. She had grandchildren. She remembered meeting them for the first time, 2 weeks after the curse was broken. Small faces looking up at her with curiosity and hope, hands reaching for hers. She had felt nothing, but she had held them anyway. She had learned their names, their favorite foods, their silly jokes. She had built something where feeling should have been. And now, 6 months later, when she heard their laughter echoing through the corridors, something stirred in the hollow place. Not love, but close enough. I will be down shortly, she told Valdrin. He crossed to stand beside her, his hand finding hers with easy familiarity. I had a letter from Izaveth's caretaker today, he said quietly. Sarilith turned to look at him. Her caretaker? She survived the ritual barely. The curse did not take her life as we expected. Instead, it took her magic, her strength, her memory of ever casting it. He paused. She is like a child now, innocent, unburdened by the guilt that imprisoned her for 40 years. The caretaker says she smiles often. Sarilith considered this. The woman who had cast the curse no longer remembered doing so. Perhaps that was a mercy? Perhaps that was justice. She may stay where she is, Sarilith said. Let her have peace. Valdrin squeezed her hand. You continue to surprise me. How so? You have every reason to hate her. To hate all of this. To resent what you lost. He turned to face her fully, his eyes soft with emotion she could not share. But instead, you choose kindness. Every day, you choose kindness. Kindness costs nothing, and we have all lost enough. He smiled, that same smile she remembered from 40 years ago. The smile that had made her fall in love with him. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that time had carved there. She could not feel the love that should have accompanied the gesture. But she could feel the rightness of it. The certainty that this was where she belonged. I cannot love you, she said quietly. Not the way I did before. I know. But I can choose you. Every day, I can choose you. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Is that enough? Valdrin kissed her back, gentle and fierce and achingly tender. It is everything, he whispered against her mouth. It is more than I ever dared hope for. They stood together on the balcony as the sun sank below the mountains. Two people who had survived impossible odds. Two hearts, one whole and one hollow, beating in the same rhythm. Behind them, in the palace they had nearly lost, their sons laughed with their children. Their kingdom flourished. Their legacy endured. And somewhere in the hollow where Sarilith's heart used to be, something warm and nameless continued to grow. Not love, but perhaps, with enough time, with enough choosing, with enough stubborn, relentless devotion, it would become something just as precious. Perhaps it already had.